Hello and welcome to Vitality Women Leading Audaciously. Today, our guest is Nadine Hack. She is an author. She is you gave me the three words and now I'm losing them. She is an author. She is a coach, and she's writing a book called about connection. So she's also a connector. So I know I just completely jumbled that, and I apologize, but I'd love for you to tell us about yourself.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm the CEO of a company called beCause Global Consulting. And while we provide the full spectrum of management, consulting, organizational change development, leadership development, our real niche, what we're known for around the world, is connecting people to their own core mission, connecting organizations to their own core mission, connecting within organizations, like breaking down the silos and making more, leveraging the power of what's within an organization, and connecting outside of organizations to partners, vendors, suppliers, clients, and even adversarial. The TEDx talk that I did is called Adversaries to Allies. And it's about how you build the bridges to get diverse people to be able to talk to each other and listen to each other. And the sister not-for-profit of my company is called Global Citizen Circle, and it has been since 1974 convening people of extremely diverse backgrounds, intergenerational, cross-sectoral, different regions of the world, nationalities, religions, races, political perspectives, to discuss current hot topics, difficult conversations in civil discourse, with the aim of collectively coming up with sustainable solutions to our world's problems.
I mean, this is really big. I mean, you've probably been in some pretty volatile conversations with people who would want to maybe even kill each other, like people who really are having, and are leaders, it sounds like, as well.
Yeah. We've had Republicans and Democrats in the United States have dialogue about issues. We've had people from different backgrounds more recently talking about critical race theory, which has been a highly polarizing issue. We've had people from Northern Ireland, Protestants and Catholics. We've had people from South Africa, during apartheid and post-apartheid. We've had people really throughout the world come together. And I feel my role is to help people see what to me is so obvious, that we have so much more in common than what's different about us, and we are each totally unique, and honor that uniqueness. It doesn't mean we have to become the same. It doesn't mean we have to believe the same. It just means that if we can respectfully approach each other, then there's a chance we can learn, we can grow, we can help solve issues. And also, that's why I'm so interested in cross-sectoral partnerships, because no one sector on its own, government, business, civil society, academia, can solve the problem, anything, because everybody has their strength and everybody has their blind spots. So I'm a real believer that the whole is always greater than the sum of the parts. And the more that you can bring people together to cooperate, to at least listen and possibly learn, and then ideally lead, that the greater the likelihood that we can make this a more just, a more sustainable, a healthier world for everybody.
Absolutely. And Nadine, how did you get into this? Like, what led to this? I mean, it certainly didn't happen overnight, like what were kind of the building blocks along your path that led to this interest and then the actual ability for you to engage?
So it's really interesting, because I almost feel like I came into the world with this wiring. One of my earliest memories, I happen to be Russian Jewish. My husband is Irish Catholic. We were married by Desmond Tutu, an Anglican who performed the ceremony in Kosa. So, I'm very ecumenical, even in my own immediate family. When I was 5 in Hebrew school, I was taught that the Jews were the chosen people.
Right.
And I found that idea profoundly disturbing. And it was at Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, which are the Jewish high holidays. And the teacher was explaining about how, if you prayed and repented during the 10 days between, whatever bad things you had done the year before could be wiped clean, a kind of karmic concept.
Yeah.
And I raised my hand and I said, well, what about all the Gentiles? Because at that point in my life, I didn't know Buddhist, Hindu, Confucianist, or even the different denominations of Christianity. I only knew Jew, Gentile. So what about the Gentiles? They don't know that they're supposed to be praying and forgiving people for things that they've done. And she said, oh, Natana, that's my Hebrew name. Natana, don't worry about that. We're the chosen people. And so I went home. And in synagogue, this was my 5-year-old prayer. God, I'm praying for all the Gentile families in the world because they don't know that they're supposed to be doing this. So it's not their fault. The Jewish families are okay because they know what they're supposed to be doing, but the Gentiles don't. So don't blame them. So, where did that come from? And then as I grew older, I became very, very involved in political activism at quite a young age, like 12 years. And I had the privilege of working with Shirley Chisholm and Bella Abzug. And Shirley Chisholm is the first Black woman who ran for president of the United States. But I worked with her when she ran for her very first state assembly race in 1964. And I worked with Bella Abzug in Women's Strike for Peace. It was about the time of the Vietnam War. And what the two of them taught me, they were my mentors, was that issues of sexism, racism, classism, and militarism are inextricably interconnected. And what today we call intersectionality, like environmentalists helping people who are fighting for access to health and education and vice versa. And so at a pretty young age, that was kind of my foundational motivation. And I just kept doing it. I kept doing it through political organizing, through social justice organizing, through the different jobs that I've held. I've worked at the United Nations, I've worked in academia, I've worked in business and government. I've had a very nonlinear life and a very multifaceted life.
Interesting. So interesting. And I love how it roots right down to your core of who you are at age 5. And, I too have been really, so my father, I come from a Jewish and Christian family growing up, and I never really thought about it as the basis of my curiosity about human behavior and the common ground. Because when I turned 18 and I moved to New York, I spent all my free time in the theology library, just around the corner from my agency. And I was so preoccupied with the question of why these wars would be fought. If everyone believes in God, then why would people be fighting about it? And so that's when I dove deeply into Sufism, Confucianism, Taoism, even Judaism, because my father's side was Jewish, like Ashkenazi. I don't know if you'd call that Russian really, but it's, Lithuanian.
Ashkenazi, yeah.
And so it's interesting. I never really correlated that to you were telling your story, because I too am very preoccupied with the humanity of humanity. And understanding that, and as I've traveled all over the world, and I know that humans are seeking the same things, but something about the human heart, irrespective of race, creed, or religion.
It's so true. Everybody wants their family to be healthy, happy, safe, secure, have housing, be able to eat, be able to play. I mean, there's such fundamental human desires, and everybody wants to be connected, whether it's in a family unit, whether it's in a tribal unit, a community, a religious affiliation. The difficulty comes when people use those affiliations as barriers and say, us good, everybody else bad.
Why do you think they do that? What do you think is the root cause of that behavior in and of itself?
I think that it's fear, and that the kind of rise of nativist populism, exclusionary populism, divisive populism plays on people's fears. And they just don't know. It's fear. And the shift is going from fear-based motivation to love-based motivation, heartfelt, recognizing that, well, I may not know you, you may not be directly related to me, but actually in this world where every molecule of air travels everywhere, as we've just seen, COVID, pandemics, climate change do not respect nation states. They certainly don't respect individual communities. They travel freely, and that's always been the case. So ideas have traveled freely.
Right.
It's interesting, when you think about the mythologies of different cultures. I don't know if you've ever read any of Joseph Campbell's stuff.
Of course, all of it. Yeah.
So, I mean, basically, the premise is that every single culture on Earth comes up with these same archetypal stories.
Yeah.
Like cultures that were so geographically disparate and nowhere, there's no way that they could have learned it from each other, but it came up from them as a way of sense making and meaning.
Right. Whether you're in China, whether you're in Greece, whether you're in India, right? Africa.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And the fear-based is it's why I think the Star Wars franchise has been so wildly successful globally, because throughout all of human history, there have been voices for openness, compassion, kindness. I mean, when you think about it, every single religious tract, has the golden rule as its essential, take in the stranger, feed the hungry.
Right.
And at the same time that there's always been those voices, there's always been the voices of what I call darkness and division, like territorial, me, it's a finite, if I give anything away to anybody, I lose something.
Yeah, and that's the fear, that you were talking about.
And that's the fear, and those voices have always been there. And so I feel like my role is to be one of the voices of light and to amplify whoever is creating light. It's why I was drawn to you and the work you do, because you amplify light and love and health.
Thank you. Yes, and so I'm thinking back to the very nature of it, right? So it exists. We know it as part of human behavior. It comes from the affliction of greed, from power, right? And at the base of all of those afflictions is, I agree, fear. And it's interesting, like when you observe your children, because I know you're a mother of 4, you said, right? And so before the children develop their ego, when they still refer to themselves in the third person, which is such a sweet thing. And there is a kind of fearlessness before that frontal cortex gets fully developed. And it is quite beautiful to see, actually. And fear is just part of the human condition. And so what are the healing factors of this connectivity that you have found?
So first, let me clarify something about my family. My husband is 15 years older than I.
Okay.
He married the first time extremely young. He had 5 children in 6 years. I bow down to his first wife, blessed be her memory.
Yeah.
Because anybody who does that is amazing. But when
Right.
I met and married him, he had 4 late teens, 1 early 20. And so they were already individuated,
Yes.
college. And but I worked very hard at creating my own personal relationship with each of his young adult children.
Nice.
And by the time they got married and started to have children, and so we have 6 grandchildren, it was like granddad and grandma. It wasn't like granddad and Nadine. It was, I was
Nice.
there from the beginning. So,
Beautiful.
and I threw myself into grandmotherhood because I hadn't biologically carried children and I hadn't done that kind of day-to-day raising. I was at every, cross-country ski race and horse
Oh my
jumping
gosh.
and birthday parties and
But
Hanukkah
just for the folks
Christmas parties.
listening, this is like typical stuff for the area that she lives in Switzerland and Lutry. It's so ironic. Like when I saw that when I connected with her, I was like, oh my gosh, I know Lutry. And so that the activities she's describing are things that you do in Lutry, isn't it?
Yeah, and there are things that I did with my grandchildren. So I never let more than a few weeks go by where I wasn't fully engaged. And I read all the child development books that you
Oh
would
my
usually
goodness.
when you become a parent, when I became a
Wow.
grandparent. And I was really struck because I was watching cartoons with my grandchildren.
Oh
And
yeah.
I'm really struck by how every single cartoon, every male character was chiseled jaw, charging forward with a sword, purposeful, focused, strong. And every female character was like purple, sparkly, ditzy, save me. And I was so horrified that they were absorbing these cultural messages pre-verbally. It was really shocking to me.
Yeah, that is shocking.
Yeah.
That is shocking. But you find that
I
children
do
who aren't even
find-
exposed to that also are still in this, it's a human condition to have greed and fear and to want power, right? The development of the ego.
And the kind of patriarchal society that is pretty much global, in which you absorb these messages by osmosis before you're even like consciously thinking.
Right. And whenever there's like a problem in the connective tissue in our bodies, we feel pain, we get inflammation, the body tries to heal itself, sends an army of, inflammatory response and the T cells action, right? So we have these connections in our bodies, the myelinian sheath in our nervous system, right? So when that connection is disrupted, we have a whole host of, problems with ALS and MS, that's kind of what happens. So when we disconnect in our physical body, there are issues. And so also in relationships, I think there's no separation between the natural phenomena that we see outside of ourselves and also inside of ourselves, but also energetically in relationships. And this is like your sweet spot, this connection.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, we are so vibrationally connected to everything and everybody, whether we're conscious of it or not. And the way you describe the fascia and that, all the different parts of the body that get inflamed when we're not in harmony, when we're at dis-ease, are exactly applicable, whether you're talking about an immediate family, like a nuclear family dynamic, or you're talking about, 2 different groups of people, a minority group and a majority group within any given country, or you're talking about people in different beelines in the same, corporation. When we view them as other, and more importantly, I think before we can actually fully connect to another person, we have to really fully connect to ourselves. So like you, I've done an enormous amount of work over many decades, work that spans the spectrum, from healing, indigenous top of the mountain in a sweat lodge drumming to, psychotherapy to everything in between.
Right. I love it. Me too.
Because I experienced trauma when I was young, and many people experience trauma. And even people who haven't had particularly personally traumatic experience are part of an ecosystem that has a lot of trauma in it.
Sure. Yeah.
And I kind of initially, when I was very young and I didn't yet have the coping mechanisms, I just compartmentalized.
Yeah,
and I, disassociated and pressed down the bad things. And as I've grown, and I see my healing journey as a lifelong process.
Absolutely.
Like I'm going to be at this until I'm in whatever happens next after you're buried. I don't know. I'm going to be at this forever, because you can always go deeper and you can always go broader.
Yes.
And in the process, I learned how to own my wholeness, to like the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
Like to embrace all of it. Because if I didn't, it's like a pressure cooker without the steam valve.
Yeah, it seeks out.
It's either gonna implode or explode.
Yeah, it seeps out. You can't avoid it.
You can't. So you have to walk through the pain.
Yeah.
To get to the healing and the light and the freedom, on a body level, on a mind level. And we know that they're so
connected, integrally
connected.
Yeah.
And our thoughts affect our biological system and vice versa. I mean, and so you can go into a downward spiral yourself, or you can go into a downward spiral of conflict with someone, or you can choose to go into an elevating where you just keep peeling away the layers of the onion and embracing more and more the shadow self, the not just the idealized self, but the whole person.
Yeah.
And I find, because I've worked with so many senior leaders from like every sector all over the world, that the difference between highly, highly competent executives and great leaders always turns on their degree of self-awareness.
That is beautifully put.
The degree to which they know themselves, they know their weaknesses, they're willing to be vulnerable and say, I don't know about that, in front of their team. It's more likely that their team will trust them when they speak with authority about something, because they're admitting when they don't know something.
Or they're so counterintuitive, but yeah, no, I know exactly. I agree. That's amazing. Yeah. Love how you, from your level of experience, that you're stating that. That's really powerful. It gives everyone permission to own it.
Exactly. I mean, it's like what Brene Brown and all of her work on vulnerability has been about, really like it's your greatest power. Like your deepest hurt is your greatest power. And the same thing, like your greatest power also has its shadow side. So it's like, there is what we're doing in life, and I know what you're doing very much through your work, is trying to find equilibrium.
Absolutely.
Equilibrium within ourselves, equilibrium in our relationships, equilibrium between our work and our home life, and it's not like you ever get there because it's iterative, it's circular, it's cyclical. You go through different stages, you get more connected, you step back, you lose it, you remember it, you forget it, you remember it. It's just, we have to be conscious. I mean, the first step is being conscious, being aware, self-aware and conscious. And then you have a chance of dealing with whatever it is that's holding you back, that's making you sick, that's making you off kilter.
And this is a really interesting topic, specifically because a lot of the yogic background that I have, as well as the theological and religious background I have, leads towards always the aim of oneness. And
Mhm.
and we're taught in all of these different, avenues I've taken, that anything other than that is an illusion.
Mhm.
And I oftentimes ask myself at the beginning of the day, when I do my, whatever you want to call it, meditation, prayers, my morning ritual, anything that brings me away from oneness, please bring it to light so that I can, that I can heal that. Because essentially that is the moment when we disconnect, isn't it? When we realize when we identify, or that we act out the separation. I don't know if I'm saying it
No, you're saying it
correctly.
beautifully. You're saying it beautifully. It's really true. There's been a more attention recently on something called intergenerational trauma,
Right.
because
Yeah.
it's not only everything that's around us, it's everything that came before us, it's everything that we're carrying in our DNA, it's everything that we're carrying genetically, it's everything that has been passed down through generations. And we are all so deeply connected to all of that. Um, and I too find yoga an incredibly centering, grounding practice to bring me back to myself. Like, I faithfully go to my yoga classes. And if the little voice in my head says, "Oh, you're too busy, you've got too many deadlines today, you can skip yoga," thankfully, I have another voice that goes, "If you're saying that, you need to get to yoga today more than ever."
And it gets
Because
dark so early in November. In Switzerland, it's like dark at like 3:30, 4
I,
o'clock. It's so crazy. And so it's kind of like, oh, I should be home,
way
like
I'm
making
using
dinner, going to
overhead
bed.
light, which is reflecting a little bit in my glass because there's no outside light. It's dark. It's black
Yeah,
out.
it's so dark. In November, I used to get not depressed, but I was like, oh my gosh, it's just like the light. It's all good. But so this leads me to the next thing, because you've got 4 stepchildren, or children, and 6 grandchildren. So you've got your business, you've got your appointment with the educational institution. I don't know if it's a university. I think it is, isn't it?
IMD Business School in
Business
Lausanne,
school.
yes.
And so I'm just curious, how was it yoga that helped you to balance it all? Like, what tools have you used, or do you use to keep the balance? This is such a rich conversation. I don't really want to divert over here, but
No, that's okay. I mean,
yeah.
yoga is definitely one of the tools. Probably the simplest tool and is breathing.
Yeah. No, but it's
Because I
also the
can get
fastest.
really wound up.
Yeah.
I'm like A-type driven personality. I can get so wound up.
Me too.
And I can also get super depleted because I give a lot. I take care of everybody and everything, and I can
Yeah,
forget to take care of myself.
sure.
And just taking 3 deep breaths.
Changes
And you
everything.
can do that anywhere. You can do that in your office. You can do that on a subway. Honestly, it kind of just brings you back to like, okay, here I am now, and here's everything. And, the proverbial on the airplane, why the airline steward says, put on your own oxygen mask before you try to help anybody else. Because if you're not nourished, if you're not breathing, if you're not healthy, then you're not able to help anybody else.
That's right. Yeah.
And
So is that what you do when you're depleted? You go to the breath, or is there something else that
I
you
go
do
to
as
the
well?
breath.
Yeah.
I do things. I have yoga. I have other things that are strictly for me personally,
Hmm.
like getting my manicure,
Oh, which is not
getting
easy
a
to,
massage.
it's actually not very easy to find a manicure in Switzerland. I remember
Yeah, I
trying.
know. It's way more expensive than New York. That
Oh
I
my
can tell you.
gosh, I couldn't believe it. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me.
But uh, taking a walk outside. My phone has an alarm that
Okay.
goes off every day at 1:30 p.m.
Mhm.
And when it goes off in giant, and it keeps ringing until I answer it.
Right.
And in giant letters, it says walk.
So
And,
whatever you
and
do.
what that's saying to me is, you've been sitting at your computer or at your desk or whatever in
Yeah.
meetings since 6:30 this morning.
Mm.
It's 1:30 in the afternoon. That means 7 hours. Get your butt out of the chair, get outside. Doesn't matter if it's raining, snowing, whatever, get outside, take a stretch. And again, I don't want to dictate to anyone what they should do to renew themselves, because I think each person has to find their own renewal. For example, one of the things that renews me tremendously is at the end of a long work day, I love to like binge out on a Netflix series in my
Nice.
PJs on the couch.
Cool. Yeah.
Because I can like let go of everything and just get transported into another world. So there's no one right way. It's for someone it's running, for someone else it's meditating, for someone else it's watching Netflix. But you just have to find what it is that brings you joy. Like I'm in a co-writing group and we meet 5 mornings a week. It's, on Zoom, and we're each writing our own book. And
I love that. Good for you.
yeah. And so doing the things that whatever it is for you, find the thing that calls to you, find the thing that gives you pleasure, that gives you joy.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And I think all of our listeners need to give themselves permission. And I think that's what I've noticed with this community of high performing women like you and me. It's like, we want to get our to-do list done. We have this command of excellence for ourselves, our work,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth. And we don't really give ourselves permission. So, and it doesn't, I love what you said, it doesn't have to look any certain way. It could be reading a book. It could be binging on Netflix.
Exactly.
It could be, as long as,
yeah,
as long as you're not doing something that's, completely harmful.
Right.
To unload.
No. Comedies,
Right.
tearjerkers, things that make me, no psycho thriller murder stuff for me.
Yeah, I just remember I was so angry after my divorce. I just had a lot of stuff I was processing, and I used to go buy dishes from like the Goodwill, and I would just like, break them, on my chimney,
Right.
and that was a way, that was extreme measures
Yeah.
for extreme situations. But
some people use kickboxing for that
right.
kind of release of, like, I tell people, look, you're carrying grief. You're carrying rage. If you're human, you're carrying grief, you're carrying rage. You got to find a way to let it out. Whether it's journaling, whether it's running, whether it's kickboxing, whether it's throwing those plates against the chimney, you've got to express it, because otherwise it's going to do damage to you. And while it lives in you, you're going to do damage to other people.
Absolutely. Hurt people. And that's a fact. So we have to find outlets for it. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so motivated by the emotionally engaged embodiment practice that I'm involved in the last, I've been involved in yoga for almost 30 years. But the idea of like the neocortex inhibitive movement that actually accesses the rage or the grief or the upset in the body and move it, that is something that is just profoundly influenced my work, my own personal work in the last couple of years. It's just been really interesting. And I think that's why tribes have danced in grieving. That's why we see primitive cultures, who really use dance and movement and sound, either singing or instrumental or both, to celebrate and also to grieve. It's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I would call them origin cultures more than primitive cultures.
Thank you.
They were not primitive ever.
Thank you for that. I didn't have that word. Thank you so much for that. Because as it came out, I thought that sounds like a power over context, and that's not really what I mean at all. So thank you.
I knew you didn't mean it.
No, but I really appreciate that. Origin cultures. I've actually never used those two words together. So that's new for me. Thank you.
Yeah.
My goodness, I feel like we could go on and on.
We have a lot to learn from our origin elders. They had a lot of wisdom. They have a lot of wisdom.
Yeah, they really do.
There are Native American healers for whom so many people could benefit learning from them. So, I think learning and mentoring is always a two-way street. It's not just like one person has the knowledge and passes it down.
That's
and
so
it's
true.
it's like young people. I'm so excited about working with young people. I've always
Me
loved
too.
working with young people.
Me
Isn't
too.
it thrilling? I
Oh
mean,
my,
they know
they are
so much
so,
more about things that I'm clueless.
yeah, they're so switched on, and their radar of like what's real is really fine tuned, and they're
Yeah.
so
So
into the activism and speaking up, and they're courageous. And I'm totally excited about our future.
I'm totally inspired.
Yeah, my daughter's 17,
I
and
mean,
she and her friends, I mean, just the words, the things that they talk about, the words they use, the things they're interested in, how they question, all these different aspects of what's happening globally. It's fascinating.
it is. It is. There's hope. Keep hope alive.
And they've overtaken the baby boomers, so they are in majority now.
I know. I know.
And I believe in the power of the people. I really, really do. Oh my goodness. And I feel like there's so much more I want to talk about, specifically around your findings, in the solutions for connection, which I heard for you. I'm going to use different words, but common ground, like that
Yeah.
awareness and that consciousness, and that, intentionality.
Intentionality is a good word. Being conscious and then intentional.
Yeah. And so if anyone listening wants to learn more about Nadine's work, she's written many articles for Forbes. She's authoring a book right now. She has TED Talk. I mean, she can really learn more about her work and her journey. There's so much more to her. And this has been such a
The
rich.
simplest way is if you want to know more, you can go to my website, beCause.net. It's because global consulting, bringing causes to life. So it's beCause.net. And there you'll find links to, all my social media. And, it's really up to you, whoever's listening to this. If anything Helene and I said today resonated with you, to be in touch with us, because we're open to sharing and learning.
Absolutely. The invitation is open. The door is open. And, I think for me, I first started thinking about this topic, of course, in the theological library when I was 18, just in New York City. But then after my marriage, my marriage wasn't working out, and I couldn't figure out how to connect. And I was so frustrated and concerned. And then I found nonviolent communication, Marshall Rosenberg's work, which you may be familiar with.
Yes.
And I've been actively practicing that. My goodness, it's not easy, but I've been actively practicing it for now, probably 12 years, maybe longer. And
what you just said about not easy, I have to emphasize that. What we've been talking about is deceptively simple seeming.
yeah,
Very hard work, but work that is so well worth doing.
it is.
Because without doing the work, you're going to suffer more.
It's true. And it's literally
and
life-saving. It's world-saving.
It's life-saving. It's life-saving and world-saving at the same time.
Yeah, I don't think that
there's
more important.
There's something, if you save one life, you've saved the world.
Wow. Just going to take that in. Because I definitely exist inside of a context of not enough. And I've definitely saved lives, definitely. And that means a lot when you say that, because I've really never thought that before, that could be enough.
Wonderful. You're a healer. You're a healer.
Oh. Well, Nadine, thank you so much. Love to have you again, because there's so much more I'd like to talk about, especially when your book comes out, and learn about the direct work. Because I think a lot of people, we can listen and hear on an intellectual level, like, oh yeah, intentionality, consciousness, but what does it look like in application? Like that would actually be a really valuable conversation. Like, what does the application of it look like? Because we all get into these sticky situations, whether we're at the stoplight or the grocery store, or gosh, even in our families with all of the COVID conversations. So, how do we connect even though we don't agree? And that's where I'd love to look at a part two, because that is something we all face every day and we struggle with.
And takes effort, It takes a desire. But I can say it's so worth it. I mean, just, I feel like I have the richest life of anybody I know, and I don't mean that financially. My life is just so filled with loving connections that go in concentric circles out to people, some of whom I've never met, but we've somehow touched each other. And
it satisfies every hunger, doesn't it?
Excuse me?
It satisfies every hunger.
It does. It does. I feel full and fulfilled. And that's nice. I could not always say that, honestly.
That's the word.
So it's nice to be in a place to be able to say that and mean that and feel that. And it's something that I can't take for granted. I have to keep each day waking up and recommitting to, this is who I want to be in the world. This is who I want to be for myself. This is who I want to be for my family. And take action to embody that. Beautiful. Embodied presence, as you said earlier. Embodied presence is such a remarkable state, and it gives you more power than a million power bars.
I know, right? Beautiful. Thank you so much, Nadine. Be well.
You too.